Hello, everybody. This is episode 34 of the Clappercast. We're recording on December 30th, 2019, and we are here for a recap of the last 10 years in the NHL. My name's Burke,
And I'm Sean.
and what a decade it was, Sean. A lot happened, so let's try to cram it all into an episode here.
I know. So like even just trying to think back on it, there's so many little things that I kept forgetting, and it took like a while to actually realize like all of the things that have happened within the last 10 years. And some of them I legitimately forgot about until I reread about them. So
There really was a lot that happened, and it's easy to forget a lot of the little things. So I don't fault you on that. I know I have a terrible memory, so I'm right there with you, man. But is there anything that you wanted to start off the show with?
I want to talk about one of the things that I actually completely neglected to think that happened this decade, but the return of the Winnipeg Jets.
The Jerts?
Yeah. So
Pretty,
it seems
pretty
like
cool.
it's just normal now. Like there's a team in Winnipeg, but that happened this decade that the Jets went back or the Thrashers went to Winnipeg.
Rip Atlanta.
V2.
But it's
Third
pretty
time's a charm,
cool.
Atlanta.
It is pretty cool though. I mean, it does seem like it's just like the new normal, and it's hard to think about a time where the Jets weren't there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just such a natural thing,
it
and
is.
it's worked
And
so well.
it does. I mean, right into that. I don't know if you watched their first game back, but I remember watching that on TV and just how absurdly loud that arena gets
Hmm.
and how loud it was on that first game. Like the way the stands are shaped, I think they're like super steep in Winnipeg.
Yeah,
So all of
smaller
the
building.
noise is amplified big time.
I think it's one of the loudest in the NHL just because of the
Hmm.
way that the noise is all kind of funneled down towards the ice.
Yeah. Yeah. So game one there was just absurdly loud, and I'm pretty sure like the commentators just stopped talking for a while and just let the noise take over. Just to like try and get the people who are watching on TV to be familiar with what's happening in the arena and just how passionate and loud everybody was.
I always like when the announcers let the building speak for itself, when they
Yeah.
just take a step back and let the people hear the crowd noise. It's always a really cool
There's
moment.
there's something hugely symbolic about that
Hmm.
where they're in the arena experiencing it and they're like, this is incredible. I'm just gonna shut up and let it sink in for everybody at home too. There's just something really symbolic and cool about that.
Yeah, it's always cool when they do that for like cup wins.
Yes. Like the last 20 seconds they'll kind of let the crowd take over and let the they'll like turn the bench mics up, it sounds like. So you get the players
Hmm.
starting to cheer on the bench.
All the cursing, all the fucking rights.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good call though. I also kind of forgot that that happened this decade because I was ready to bring up that Vegas, that's a new thing, and that's the success of the expansion franchise is kind of a new
Yeah.
thing. Previously it's been just kind of a nightmare for teams coming into the league, just being garbage for so long. They've had garbage, you know, seasons. Like the Capitals, when they came in, they were the worst. They still have the record for the worst expansion team. We
Yeah.
haven't seen a lot of success early on, and it's kind of
No.
cool to see that rebound. I don't know if that's the new normal. It seems like Seattle is going to have a tougher time because teams know how to approach it now. But
Yeah, there might be a little bit more smarter ways of approaching the draft, but I feel like the rules that Seattle and Vegas are going to get draft or the expansion rules are going to get for their drafts are so much more lenient
mhm,
than what like say Minnesota and Columbus and Nashville got.
right,
So they have access to a lot more better players.
yeah, and making all those crazy deals like, oh yeah, take Riley Smith if you take Jonathan Marchessault, so we'll protect Petrovic. Like it's
Yeah.
just all that sort of weird stuff. I don't know if Seattle's going to benefit from some of that.
Which coach is going to get like have a really good reputation and then get fired and then get to sign on to the expansion team and do really well? Is it
Yeah,
going to be this time?
definite trend. Um, and I guess Seattle being announced, that I guess that kind of counts for this decade too. Um,
Definitely.
just the growth of the league. Um, and that's been a huge part of this decade is just growth. I think the
Growth, yeah.
NHL has been trending up for sure.
Is as much shit as everyone gives Gary Bettman. Him and the team that he's been leading have done an excellent job at growing the league. If we just look
Absolutely.
at, we're using like say player salaries as like an indicator of league success, just how much those have been going up since, we'll say the last like 20 years, but even the last decade.
Hmm.
When, Crosby signed probably close-ish to Crosby and Ovechkin signed kind of close to the last decade. They were hitting like a 9 to 9.5 million cap hit as a max for a player, I think. And now we're up to like 13, 14. And
Yeah.
we're seeing guys like Jeff Skinner who can now command that same amount on the market.
Yeah, definitely growth in the money. I feel like I've read some things about there being bigger TV audiences in smaller markets. We've seen like a place like Nashville just explode with hockey fandom.
Yeah,
I mean, the
that's so
success of
cool.
Vegas. There's just like the smaller market teams are becoming bigger, and I think it's a great move for the league. However, the one drawback to all of this is that the NHL is not going to the Olympics, which is I think one of the biggest stories of this decade.
Yeah,
So,
and how about we'll start with one of my favorite moments of the decade,
mhm.
and one of the reasons I'm most kind of like sad about not getting to watch NHL players at the Olympics, and talk about the golden goal, right to
Huge.
kick off this past decade. How how big was that game in Canada and the US? The 2010
Absolutely
Olympic
massive.
gold medal final in Vancouver.
Absolutely
Like
massive.
that moment is in hockey history. It's kind of written in like the lore of the hockey books. And of course, Canada's golden child, Sidney Crosby, scores it.
Yeah, it was storybook, and um, this TSN had a poll, or not a poll, it was just kind of a post, and it was, what is the biggest Canadian sports moments of the last decade? And I think that golden goal has got to be it. You know, it was up against things like the Toronto Raptors winning. I don't know what even else was up there, but the bat flip, like, like it's just
Yeah, like
not even the same like
no,
planet of
no.
importance. It's just the
The same
the golden
significance,
goal was
just the
huge.
yeah. It
It's
like
just
that's and I mean that was also like a country moment. Not
yeah,
everyone is a hockey fan, of course, but that was like a country moment.
yeah, the
Team Canada
Olympics,
beats
the
Team
biggest
USA.
stage. Yeah, it was important. It's one of those things where like you remember where you were, you remember who you're with. It's just one of
Yep,
those huge
definitely.
things. And
Yeah, in a similar vein to like Paul Henderson's goals in the Summit Series.
mhm, yeah, and then the Sochi Olympics 2014, um, also a big one, but not quite the same as being at home. And then
No, there's a little bit of the significant, well, not significance, but the energy taken out of it when you have to get up at like 4 in the morning to watch the game.
yeah, I did it, and
I
to
same here.
me,
I did do it.
it was against Sweden. It wasn't as crazy. I remember being a little bit salty about the win because the Swedes had to play without Nicklas Backstrom, their number one center, because he drank like cough syrup that was deemed to be performance enhancing or something.
He's
So,
doping.
yeah, he got his medal like I think like 6 months later. They were like, oh, okay, maybe it was fine, but um, yeah, definitely not as significant of an event, I think, for Canadians at least, because of the being further removed from it.
Yeah, so we're not watching the games live unless you get up super early. It's kind of, yeah, but that doesn't change the fact that the Olympic tournament is the way to have the best on best
Yes.
in a way that nothing else allows it. And that's kind of the main appeal of it. And that's kind of where a lot of hockey fans get kind of distraught at not being able to watch it. Because, like, sure, we get to watch them play all the time in the NHL, but it's never like the all-star team's best on best giving it their all, game in, game
Yeah.
out.
And I think the NHL's experiment with the World Cup of Hockey was a success, but it wasn't quite it was nowhere near the level of
No,
excitement as the Olympics command.
I didn't even watch any of that tournament, to be honest. I just didn't get into it.
Yeah, I mean it was fun with like the Team North America, the young guys versus, you know, Team Europe. That was kind of a cool
Yeah,
idea, but it's just not the
yeah.
same.
I saw a lot of it as like a gimmick, like just a company gimmick versus the significance of an Olympic tournament. Like
Yeah.
that's got historic value. This one is just like a yeah, we'll have a tournament with everybody.
Yeah, and it's just kind of weird because like right before the season begins, and goalies aren't super sharp at that time of year, so there's more scoring.
Yeah, and
Like
everyone's
the
still finding their legs.
hmm it's just not it's just not the same. I just
No.
but I mean it's something. It's something. And I really hope that in moving into the next decade that we can get back to the Olympics because that's where all the players want to be. That's where all the fans want the players to be.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can figure it out.
Yeah, as long I mean, I think the main issue is that the NHL can't put their name on their assets basically, right? The
Yeah,
Olympic
that's my
the Olympic
understanding.
Committee or whoever won't budge on that part, and the NHL is like, well, you're using like our players
Yeah.
in the middle of our season and we can't even like try and benefit from it.
hmm Yeah. Well, our
So I
players are
hope
gonna
there's
get
some sort
hurt.
of middle ground they can find.
I hope so too. Um, maybe next up, we've tackled the Olympics. Maybe let's just tackle some rule changes, if you don't mind. I think we should
Yeah,
touch on those because there's been some pretty major changes the last 10 years.
definitely.
Um, I think the most significant one is probably Rule 48, the check to the head rule. Would you agree?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, by far. So yeah, so Rule 48, the illegal check to head rule, that basically got implemented very early in the decade, like March or April or something, in
hmm
response to Matt Cook hitting Mark
Mark
Savard
Savard?
directly in the head, massive concussion. I was that his last, was that kind of the end of his career at that point,
I think so.
or did he continue
Yeah.
on? Yeah,
I,
so
I think that
pretty
was his
much ending Mark Savard's career, and the hit at the time was completely legal. There was nothing the NHL could do to punish Matt Cook for it, based off of how they had set up the rule book in the past. So what was it? 3 weeks after that, after all of the backlash from every party, an interested party, they very quickly put in a mid-season rule change that is Rule 48 that is targeting those illegal checks to the head, where the head is the initial point of contact and the primary point of contact. And the significance of this one through the decade is that we've seen like every single year this rule being applied to hits on the ice, to hits and suspensions, and we're seeing like the progression of the rule in the game where these types of hits are kind of being phased out over the last few years. And like this is a primary point of development of the game. It's kind of leading that charge, I think.
Yeah, it's an important rule change that needed to be made because the player safety should be paramount and those cheap shots needed to be taken out. And we're seeing that evolve over time because, like you said, that they had to do something about it, and they reacted. Um, Now we're kind of seeing every hit be slowed right down and examined frame by frame. People are trying to determine intent. It's an interesting time. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely trying to protect players, but it's it's in a interesting space right now. Um, we're also seeing we should touch on this too, is the Department of Player Safety is kind of growing up
Oh
with
yeah,
this rule change.
they've
Um,
been a very heated topic this decade too.
yes, and their inconsistency in applying rules
Is a
such as
yearly
Rule
story.
48 is, yeah, it's definitely been a controversy every season.
So yeah, I mean they've been a massive inconsistent, controversial organization group every single season. And as we talk about the development of a rule and as they learn to implement it in the game to try and figure out the different moving parts of the rule in relation to the players on the ice. Of course, I guess there's going to be inconsistency while they work on doing that.
Hmm.
Um, doesn't make it any less frustrating as fans watching players get hit in the head with in seemingly similar situations, but one person gets nothing and the other gets 3 games.
Yeah, even within the same week.
And there's it's not the type of rule that you can have like a black and white solution. So there's always going to be a bit of gray area,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that gray area to tighten it up a bit and make it a little bit more consistent and develop those like different precedents for different types of hits and to start
Yeah.
applying those more accurately.
Yeah, I think the application of the rule has to be a bit more standard, and we're seeing it now where like fans are coming up with lists of, the most. Well, how should I explain this? Did you see that on Reddit where the people were making lists of like when the last player to be penalized against them was, or to be
Yes,
suspended?
this was in response to some Toronto
Yeah,
stuff.
because Toronto fans have said like, oh, nobody gets suspended when they play against us. So they created like a spreadsheet that said, this was the last time someone got suspended since George Peros took over. Yeah, it's just weird. Like people are trying to create narrative where there isn't one, and it's because of the inconsistencies lending themselves to that. It's just such a weird time.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I see that one is like an extension of the my team's had 4 penalties called against it. When's our power play?
yeah, we're
That
we're
that type of
due
logic.
we're due for suspension to come up against the other team. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just a weird
it's the
time
same type
frame
of
we're in now.
logic that there might be something to it, but it'd just be a massive coincidence
Yeah.
unless you know there's the inconsistency. So that's obviously a factor,
Hmm.
but it's ultimately it just ends up being a massive coincidence. And suspensions, the same as penalties, should not be given out just because you haven't had one against you in a long time.
Yeah. Um, some other rules I wanted to touch on is the hybrid icing came into effect. So I think it's worked out pretty well.
I do too.
It's I think it was brought in to prevent injuries, and I think it's done that. We don't see
It
the
has.
the huge hit from behind on the icing rush as much. I mean, we still
And
it's
I
still
think,
there.
yeah, the big one is not even like the hit. It's just when two guys get tied up and one goes flying feet first into the boards at high speeds.
Hmm.
Like that
Yeah,
Taylor Fadoon situation where he kind of just shattered his leg when he went flying into the end boards like that.
yeah. I think it's
Um,
definitely been a positive
yeah,
change, and uh, I don't think I've ever heard anyone really come out against it and asking for the touch icing to come back. I
no,
mean, you see sometimes where like the race is really close and they call it a little early and people are upset, but it's never been such a problem that anyone's
no.
ever brought it
And
up.
to be honest, the only ones that I see as a major issue, like 9 times out of 10, it's plays that go to the end board anyways.
Hmm. Yeah,
Usually they're pretty good about the hash mark ones. It's the end board ones that end up being contested more often, I think.
yeah.
However, on that note, I think one trend out of the decade, if this is even going on longer, I can't remember from the previous one, but the weak icing calls,
Oh,
where
right, where it's just
the
trickling
puck kind of like
down.
goes right through the player, but they still call it icing anyways, even though they definitely could have had it.
Hmm. Yeah,
Stuff like that, where like that can be significant to a game, but it's still called as icing.
yeah. That's something that I've noticed in the NHL over the past few years is that they have a tendency to trust the D-man a lot. That
Yeah,
he made every effort to get the puck and he's skating as hard as he looks like he is to skate back. Like there's no real emphasis on watching that player like hustle back, like you know, because icing, if you're not skating for the puck, you can wave it. Like if that guy's not trying to get back, he can get beat, right? So
hmm
they don't really look for that in the NHL. You see it probably about once a game, at least once a game, where there's a real soft icing call. And yeah, I think
yeah.
I hope
And you end up
they
getting an
get rid of
offensive
it.
zone faceoff against a tired group of people
Yeah,
that
no
could
change.
change the game.
Hmm. And
Just one of
then
those like major game management tactics.
yeah, and then the next rule change is a pretty huge controversy is the offside challenge. So this is,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
later part of
Big
the
time.
decade, but they've definitely tailored it a bit down from when they originally brought it in. So now if you challenge and it's incorrect, it's a penalty, which I think was a great change.
I do too. I think it's basically cut out all the crappy challenges from before.
Yeah,
That
it's
it got to a point where the challenge would just be used as a timeout, but it'd be a
yeah,
longer
it's
timeout.
abused for sure.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's getting to that point where it's like splitting hairs between what's offside, what's onside. It's getting really close, and it's leading to a lot of frustration. Much like the other kind of emphasis lately has been goaltender interference for the challenges. I guess coaching challenges in general is kind of a new thing this decade. Um,
Yeah.
so, both the offside and the goaltender interference. I mean, you're an Edmonton fan. I don't need to tell you about goaltender interference, but it's been
Thanks. I repressed that
frustrating.
memory.
Well, I'm bringing it back for you, recapping. So,
um,
yeah, it's just kind of like
yeah.
what even is offside? What's goaltender interference? Offside is a little bit more black and white, but
That's the thing. That's my argument against the offside stuff, where like yes, the person was 1 centimeter offside 60 seconds before the puck went in, but that they're
mhm.
still offside.
Yeah, like
Like
what's the
that's
cap
literally
on
the rule.
how far back you can go? Because if
Yeah.
someone's got zone time for like a minute and a half before they score, like, oh, they entered in offside. It's like, okay, well, I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, okay, so we roll it back to that time that was offside, right? So like, then
Hmm.
does all those shots that were made not count? Do all the saves not count? Like
I
it's
feel like, well, I
just,
mean, for continuity, yeah, like the game would be rolled back to when the offside should have been called.
mhm. So it's just,
To me, anyways. I don't have any issue with that type of call being made generally, even though I realize
yeah,
how insignificant that like small distance would be. Like he's barely offside. It's like a centimeter. But
yeah.
I
I don't
mean,
like it when
the
they go
offside
back
rule is
so
that like
far.
black and white. So
Yeah. Um,
the possession should have never happened in the first place, technically.
yeah. Um, the 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 other rule change I wanted to talk to, this is the last rule change, is the 3v3 overtime. Best rule change they've made.
So fun.
So exciting. My only
It's a nice
criticism,
way.
sorry, my only criticism is that I wish they simultaneously changed it to 3-on-3 and made it like 10 minutes because it's so fun. It's so much fun to
Yes,
watch.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, the shootout just sucks. It's it's basically just some dumb gimmick for fans. It's a complete buzzkill of a way to end a game. You have this nice, close, hard-fought tie game going into overtime and like exciting overtime period, and then there's just this buzzkill of a shootout.
Hmm.
So I totally agree that like 10 minutes would probably be better. And then that's at that point too, you're going to start to see different strategies come out instead of just like the back and forth fast guys.
Yeah.
Like you might end up seeing a third line come out for a 3-on-3 shift.
Hmm.
Probably wouldn't be as exciting, but it'd just be like different and kind of fun to see
Yeah.
what some of the other guys can do.
I
Um,
mean, that's like, sorry to cut you off there, but in overtime and playoffs, that's like my favorite hockey ever.
it's the best.
So if you had a longer regular season overtime, it would just be mm,
Yeah,
just the best.
definitely. And I think the 3-on-3 like it's a little bit gimmicky to me in the sense that it's what is true hockey in air quotes, but like it's like kind of like an arcade style where but it still
Absolutely.
captures hockey. Like the shootout's entirely a gimmick that isn't hockey. Three on
Hmm.
three is kind of a nice middle ground between that, where it's enough hockey to still be, genuine and fun to watch, but
Hmm.
it's also a little bit of an arcade style that's fun for the fans too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be a sweet change, is the 10 minutes. I think players
Yeah,
have even said like they wouldn't mind it.
No,
Um,
was
you
it
know,
Draisaitl said that? I think.
I think some players would say like I could even get ice time if
Yeah.
it was a longer.
Yeah, no
um,
doubt.
because it's fun to watch, for sure. It's been, I think, again, it's been one of those changes where like been zero negative attention to it. It's just been positive. Fans love it, players love it. Like it's fun to watch.
Definitely.
Let's maybe move away from the rule changes unless there was any other ones you wanted to go over.
Nope, that covers major rule changes anyways.
Yeah. I just remembered another one, but let's
Hey,
just
go
move
ahead.
on.
Have at it.
Um, I was gonna say I'm not sure if it was this decade, but I think it was is the grandfathering in of visors. So every player coming into the league has to wear a visor now. So we're seeing all the old school guys, like the Jamie Benns, the Zdeno Charas. They're the only guys left without visors. So
Yes.
it's just
Funny
kind of
story
like
about
moving.
that. Jamie and Jordy Ben's mom got them both visors for Christmas.
Every mom's wish.
Yeah. So
It's pretty
subtle
funny.
hint to those two guys to put on a damn visor.
I don't think they did.
Probably not.
Yeah. And just kind of a last, just popped into my head, just kind of move towards like that more safety thing. Um, you know, be a bit more of a prevention for fights, just more safety. Never a
Kind of helps
bad
with
thing.
some of the eye sticks and eye pucks and stuff too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It also helps players become pirates.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Girardi.
That's always a fun little tidbit of information when it
Yeah,
happens.
his little pirate puck, yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on, I guess. What did you want to move to next?
How about the kind of the looming threat of lockouts
Ooh,
throughout the decade? So
everybody's
that's been a big
favorite.
one right from the start, kind of, because we kind of knew about the potential for one in 2012-13 from the beginning of the decade. Sure enough, it happened. But it seems like every single season, there's just this looming threat that we know in 3 years, in 2 years, we could have another lockout. And
Oh,
the
fun.
trend, it keeps looking like we will have another one in a couple of years, that there's going to be a couple of things that they just can't agree on in time, and we lose another part of a season. Luckily, we didn't. We got it like an extension, I think, on the CBA, so it got pushed back another year.
Yeah,
So we didn't get one. Would have been this season, I think, or
yeah, I believe
beginning of next
so.
season, something like that.
I think it would have been
But
this season.
yeah, there's just that looming threat, and it's always kind of hard when you don't know when or if the season's going to start on time.
Yeah.
Those couple of years when there's the the CBA's up.
hmm Yeah, it's nobody wants to miss hockey. Um, whenever I hear about lockouts, I always think about Ovechkin because it's like,
Yeah,
his first season lockout, and then, he played a shortened season that one lockout year. And I just think like how closer would he have been to some of these records if he would have played those
because he would have
full
had,
years?
well, probably another 50 plus goals if both of those seasons were,
I think he probably would have
full.
had, yeah, like probably like 65 more goals.
Yeah, knowing him, especially earlier in his career too.
Yeah, he was such a fast, speedy scoring machine. And it was a little bit more scoring when he first came in too. So it's just makes me a sad panda when I think about missing more hockey. Not no bueno.
Always, always. Because I mean, the alternative. I mean, some guys don't play. Some guys go to the AHL, which isn't very well televised or broadcast anywhere. A
hmm
handful of guys head over to Europe. The nice thing in Canada is that junior hockey seems to take over and just get more of that on TV instead.
Yep.
But
Yeah, there's alternatives, but they're not great.
yeah, no.
The one good thing that came out of it was that Nicholas Backstrom played with Ovechkin in for Dynamo Moscow, and he wore number 99 and number 69. What a
The meme
legend!
master.
Speaking of those two, quickly, they were number one and number one for goals and assists in the last decade. So Ovechkin won, or not won, but had the most goals, and Backstrom had the most assists. Capitals had the most wins. They've just been a treat to
and they
watch.
finally got their cup.
Yeah, it's a pretty successful
So
10 years
that's a
for the
good,
Capitals.
yeah. I mean, that's one of the big stories of the decade because seven seasons in, everyone's still talking about how Ovechkin doesn't have his cup. Is he actually going to win one? Of course, questions on his leadership and all that come in. And the one year that I remember you and me talking before the season started, that there just wasn't the same pressure on them that season to win.
Hmm.
Like so they kind of had that was a season they lost like a handful of defensemen right before the year started, right?
Yep. Yeah, they lost
Yeah,
Alsner. I'm blanking, but yeah, they lost Alsner and Schmidt to the expansion draft.
yeah. And I remember saying to you like this is the one year they don't have that same pressure on them because no one really thinks it's going to happen. So of course, watch them win. Sure enough, they do.
Yeah,
And I mean, what a story, what a fun watch that was.
yeah, it was legendary.
So you as the Caps fan will have
Huge.
more to say about that than me, but
Yeah, it was a special moment. I think that it was one of those cup wins that um, not just Capitals fans can enjoy because, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people wanted to see Ovechkin get that cup, and it was just such a huge burden on his career if he never got that cup. It's kind of like when Joe Sakic passed the cup to uh, shit, blanking on names. My memory is just brutal today.
was it
You
Bork?
know, Bork, yeah, Ray Bork.
Yeah,
You can hear the Gary Thorne call in your head, like it was just one of those moments. Like I could see the Backstrom or like the Ovi to Backstrom cup pass as one of those like old school like NHL commercials.
definitely.
Um, it was just one of those huge hockey moments that it was cool to be a part of watching live. Um, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
mean
if
that
you
was the
felt the
first
same
time in
way, but
years that I had
excited.
actually definitely that was the first time in years that I'd actually wanted a team to win the cup. I'm usually just watching the cup final because it's Stanley Cup hockey and it's exciting. I have no interest in either team winning particularly much, so I'm just watching for the hell of it. But that year, like I was actually cheering for the Capitals to finally pull it off and win. I wanted to see Ovi lift the cup, and
You
it did
mean
not
you get
disappoint.
tired of watching the Chicago Blackhawks, the LA Kings, and the Pittsburgh Penguins winning? That doesn't do it for you?
Never, not at all.
Yeah, I guess like I understand that there's a lot of people who felt the same way as you. Just, it's cool to have another team win, and it's exciting because it's Ovechkin, and he
hmm
finally did it. I
and
know
him, like that moment, that picture of him grabbing the cup from Bettman, like that did not disappoint.
that was my wallpaper for a long time, and
Yeah,
I still have it as one of my screensavers. It's just such a cool picture.
yeah,
Um, One thing I did want to mention is I think a lot of people were there when Predators were in the finals, and they were trying to get that same thing going, like, let's have another team win. I mean, it didn't happen, but it's always kind of like let's see somebody else win. It's just not as huge of a moment as Ovechkin winning that cup. I don't think it was just. I mean, to me, it
and
means a lot, but
definitely.
it was a cool moment for sure. And
And
one thing I wanted to mention, sorry, um, actually, you go ahead. You go ahead.
okay, one thing, iconic moment from that cup playoffs was the save in game
Ooh,
two.
yeah.
That one I think is significant because that is going to be one of those very valuable pictures that on one day it could be on that level of like Bobby Orr's jumping goal.
It's
Just the
funny.
significance and the image of that save, especially the one from in the net.
It's funny you say that because I have two monitors. My one monitor was Ovechkin yelling when he's getting the cup. My other monitor was Holtby's save from inside the net.
Yeah, definitely. And that's just one of the iconic moments from the decade. Like that particular frame.
Yeah, that was huge. It was a big moment. What I wanted to point out is we had a decade where we had a different cup loser every year.
Yeah, that's been going back even past the decade, hasn't it?
I think so. But it's just kind of one of those cool stats. It's like, sure, we
I
had a
feel
lot
like
of
I
teams
remember
win.
hearing about this trend, and it's been going on for a while.
Yeah, we've had a lot of teams like get, multiple cups this decade, but we've also had a lot of teams make an appearance in the finals, which I think is definitely a positive. It's not just the same teams going back to back. We never had like
Oh,
Pittsburgh.
except for Boston lost twice.
Ah,
So the
shit.
Bruins ended
The
it
Bruins ruined
last
it.
season. Yeah, way to go, Boston.
Ah, that's right too. Ah,
So
Bruins
it had been going for quite a
sunk.
while though.
Ah, Boston ruined something else. I guess that's what they get. They get to lose twice since they won once.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think that was a pretty iconic moment. Is the Vancouver riots in 2011? A
Definitely.
pretty huge, huge moment. That's
I
why we
remember
can't.
that night. That was a bit insane.
That's why we can't let Canadian
That's
teams pass the conference finals. Just gets too dangerous.
yeah, that's why, right? There's preemptively saving Canadian cities from riots.
Like, could you imagine
Yeah,
if
it's still
this
rigged,
year,
everybody.
if this year the Maple Leafs make it out of the first round, and then they meet Boston in the second round?
What is this fantasy world you're living
They meet Boston in the second round and get knocked out. Like, do you think that there would be a riot?
in?
They finally win a playoff game or playoff round for the first time in like since what 2013?
It's been a long time.
Or no, they haven't even won, did they? When was the last time they won a playoff series? It wasn't 2013. What am I talking about? I don't think they
Have they
won
even won
one
this decade?
this decade. No, they haven't. They have not. No, I think they got close, but
They've
they
gotten
have never
close in a
won.
lot of years.
Yeah, yeah, they have. Um, so I think it could get interesting if they win one and then lose.
Yeah, would that be
Um,
considered a success a success of a season for going as far as they have in like 20 years, or
improvement, man. What other storylines did you want to mention for the decade?
here's more of a fun one. I found this tweet from Bonk's Mullet.
Oh,
Um, it's the first tweet is the top 10 NHL players traded by the Ottawa Senators of the decade. There's some honorable mentions that are also pretty good. So let's just kind of rattle down this list here. Number one, Eric Carlson. Number two, Mark Stone. Number three, Matt Duchene. Number four, Jason Spezza. Number five, Mika Zibanejad. Number six, Mike Hoffman. Number seven, Kyle Turris. Number eight, Ben Bishop. Number nine, Nick Foligno. And number 10, Jakob Silfverberg.
it's a pretty good team.
So some honorable mentions include Robin Leonard, Mike Fisher, Ryan Dzingel, Brian Elliott, and Zach Smith.
Could you imagine a team
So
with all those guys?
yeah, they'd be a playoff team. Like you
Yeah,
got your
they'd
number one
be
goalie,
pretty
you got your
good.
number one defenseman, you have like one of the best two-way centers in the league, like a whole bunch of depth scoring.
Got a really good backup
And
goalie
this
with
is all players the Senators have had but traded this decade. Or traded or given up in free agency, I guess, too.
yeah, that's uh that's a rough one. A really rough one.
On the note of these, one of the storylines of the decade of the last few seasons has just been like the downfall of the Senators
Yeah,
franchise,
Ottawa
and
being a shit
that one
show.
season after their conference final loss, where they just completely just caught on fire, burned to the ground, and then the ashes got blown away in the wind.
Yeah, and then those ashes landed in another fire, tire fire.
Yes,
It's been pretty
absolutely.
bad.
They
Just
appear to be on the turnaround now. This year hasn't been too bad by their standards,
yeah,
but they've got a little ways to go before they fix the reputation of what's gone on here.
kind of being outshined by the Detroit Red Wings in on ice activities. But
Yes.
I don't know. they're still embroiled in some off ice things. It's definitely been a wild ride, and
Oh, I
I'm
guess
glad I'm
you
not a
can't
Senators
forget
fan.
Daniel Alfredson too.
Yeah, the treatment of Alfie is was
We'll add
pretty
him to
pretty
the list
gross.
as well.
Yeah, yeah. Detroit Red Wing legend Daniel Alfredson.
Hmm. But yeah,
Yeah,
you mentioned the treatment of Alfredson. Yeah, the treatment of their veteran players, of these guys that are like the faces of the franchise,
yeah,
and how like they're kind of leaving with a sour taste in their mouth over how they were treated. So the reputation of the Ottawa Senators has just been a disaster the last few seasons, and I mean last 2 years anyways. It's been one of the major stories frequently popping up in NHL news circles.
yeah. And with Alfredson too, he came back to work for the team in the for um like hockey ops or something, and he quit. I think because he said that Melnick was too hard to work with.
Probably, I don't doubt it.
So yeah, that's kind of cool. Gave it a second shot and was like, nope, I made the right call
Yeah,
the first time.
yeah,
Yeah. Any particularly cool things that happened in the last 10 years that you wanted to mention? I know you had a couple things that you were thinking
yeah.
about.
How about, I mean, a couple of games that stand out for me as an Oilers fan. Sam Gagner's 8 point night. That was
Mm.
just an unreal experience to watch in some very, very dark seasons, which, another story of the decade. The Oilers still suck. um, but Sam Gagner's 8 point night. That was against Chicago, one of their down years.
Mm.
Um, just watching that on TV was incredible. That, it started off innocent enough. He had a decent decent first period, and really started to sink in the second that he's having just one of those nights where every single thing goes right for him. And by the third period, like the chants in the arena are like, "We want 10, we want 10." And normally it's like the team starts getting close to 10 goals and they want that, but no, they wanted 10 points for Gagne.
Yeah, we all want Gagne.
So
Yeah.
to have the entire arena chanting for you is quite it's another one of those like symbolic moments that just hits another level of hockey fandom.
Mm.
Um, Another one on that note too is Zach Kassian in the 2016 playoffs, that round one series versus San Jose,
Mm.
where Kassian just had this game where he was the entire team.
Yeah, I remember that.
Between his hits, between the goals he scored, like by the end of it, the entire arena in Edmonton was chanting his name, which was just so cool to watch.
Yeah, it's also kind of a cool situation that he's actually become like a favorite in Edmonton, considering,
Definitely.
you know, how much he wasn't liked
Yeah.
before he came
I
here.
mean, yeah, I mean, he did not have a great reputation at Edmonton after
Didn't he break
high
Gagne's face
sticking.
or something?
Exactly. He high sticked and slashed Gagne's jaw and broke it in the preseason. Got suspended for it, I believe.
Is that when he was on the Canucks?
But he's really stepped onto another level this season, especially with his play. But he's kind of been a fan favorite for a couple of years now, especially through that playoff run.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some games that have happened that have just been insane, but
Ben Scrivens' 59 save shutout is another one.
yeah, that's up there.
This one against San Jose, but one, Ben Scrivens' game of his life as well. 59 save shutout. That set, and it should still be the NHL record, right? I don't
Oh,
think
I
anyone's
think
hit that.
so. I think so, yeah.
But I
Scribbles.
think 59 saves is like two good games.
Yeah.
Did that in one game. I don't know if that's a testament to him just being really good or the Oilers being really bad that night, but either
Yeah,
way,
being really bad
a
at
fun game to
defense.
watch,
Yeah,
if not very tense.
yeah. Um, yeah, I can't think of a single game that comes to mind right off the bat here, but one thing that's kind of jumps out to me is just kind of how the game's changing. Like we talked about with Rule 48 coming in, there's a little less of the craziness going on in the regular season at least. Um,
Hmm.
there's definitely less fighting. There's not as many guys in the league who just fight. Like, I mean, really, are there anybody in the league who just fights? Like,
No, no, because I mean the main
not
fighters like
really.
Ryan Reeves, Tom Wilson, Zach Cassian, those types of guys, even now they can still play hockey.
Yeah,
Wilson's a productive member on like a top line. Ryan Reeves is actually a decent hockey player. Cassian is a useful member of the team aside from fighting. So, your Colton Orrs, your Steve McIntyres, those guys are pretty much done. Like you actually have to be able to play hockey now to, well, I say be able to play hockey, but you actually have to be like an NHL level player,
yeah,
even to just be an enforcer on a team.
yeah. It's definitely changed. Um, one thing actually, I just got a game that came to my mind is the San Jose versus Vegas game. Now, this is definitely going to sound like recency bias. The playoff series, Game 7, Sharks come back when
Yep,
Pavelski went down. But I think that's got to be one of the craziest playoff games of the decade.
absolutely. Absolutely
Like,
is. I mean, most games don't have that big of a comeback in that type of situation. So
no,
that is absolutely one of the biggest or most significant or unique games of the decade.
yeah, and it's possibly leading to like a rule
Which,
change.
exactly, I was just going to say, which also leads to a bit of a rule change where some major penalties are now going to be are now reviewable.
Yeah, it's that game watching it live because we talked about this on an episode, but I left your house and I thought that the game was over. I thought that the Sharks
Basically,
were done. And then by the time I had got home, Pavelski had just left the game and this power play just started. And I was watching with my dad and I was like, can you believe what is happening right now?
yeah,
It was so insane. Man, yeah, that one was one of those crazy games of the decade for sure. Up there,
definitely.
top three, I think. Probably top one, really. I think that was just insane. Yeah. Jeez. Um, I don't know. Is there anything else that you wanted to go over at all, Sean?
Here's a one of my favorite just because it's a fun and just completely out of this world day was Scott Foster's day in the
Ah,
NHL.
yeah.
I have to mention this just because it's such a unique situation. Like this was one of the most memorable moments of the decade. Scott
Mhm.
Foster, this accountant by day, NHL emergency backup hero by night. That he comes in a game against Winnipeg a few years back. Both goalies get injured. He goes into the game, plays I think it was the entire third or most of the third,
Yeah.
and shuts out the Jets. And he made a couple of actually impressive saves.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a cool moment for sure.
Yeah, it's always cool
Huge.
when the emergency backup goes in. It's not like a great situation for various reasons, but it's always cool to watch. And
Yeah.
it's just kind of one of those like it's kind of one of those like Disney movie moments
Yeah,
where
it's
it's
like
like this
the
this kind of unbelievable but very fortunate sequence of events for someone comes in and they save the day for this random average person.
yeah, what's that baseball movie like The Natural or The Rookie or something like that?
Something like, yeah, one of
Where
those
it's like an
something like
older
that.
guy coming into the league and he's just like
Lights out.
lighting it up. Um, yeah, I think it's called The Natural. So yeah, this is absolutely huge. The internet just goes wild when those happen, like
Oh,
backup,
for
like
sure.
like emergency goalie alert, like
Yep.
tune into
And
this
like
game.
that's the thing. It's such a huge moment when it happens that like everyone wants to see
And he did not disappoint.
it.
Signed a 1-day contract. Pretty
Yeah,
cool. So cool. Love it. It's
and
such a cool story.
for
Because
sure,
it
for
went
sure.
well. If it went bad, it would have been different, but it went
Even if
well.
it did, like it still would have been pretty significant because they don't often get to play as much as Scott did.
Yeah, that's true. It's just it has the warm fuzzy feeling because he shut the team
Exactly.
out,
Yeah.
got the win.
And it wasn't even like a zero save shutout. Like I said, he actually made a couple of really good saves on some cross ice passes and cross ice shots.
Like that's gotta be such an ego boost. Like you're just like a guy who plays like beer league hockey, and then you know, oh yeah, I just stopped like Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler. Like,
Yeah, stop the
like
Dustin Bufflin clapper. Like,
yeah, stop Line A. Like that's just so crazy. Go to work, you know.
go to work the next day. Hey, what'd you do last night? Oh, I played for the Blackhawks.
Yeah. Did you watch the Blackhawks game? Yeah, that was me. Pretty wild.
Yeah,
So crazy. And I hope we get to see that happen again, but you know, it's
that'd be
kind of one
fun.
of those things where it's just so unpredictable. It's just got to be the right situation, and yeah, what a crazy one. Well,
So yeah,
I
I
don't
think I
have
think that
anything
about wraps it up for the
else.
week then.
Yeah, I think so.
This is the last episode of the decade. We're going to be in a new decade the next time we record.
Wow.
So that's going to be a whole new thing to start. And we got the World Junior tournaments on right now, so we'll have some stuff to talk about with that. But on that note, I think that wraps it up for the week. So thank you once again for listening. If you like what you're listening to, make sure you share it with your friends and on your social media. If you want to follow us on social media to keep up to date with content and random stuff we post through the week, you can check us out on Instagram at Clappercast Media or Twitter at Clappercast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.